far, and let's hope it's a good year for us all. A busy year, a lot to do, and as you can see, a lot to do from this evening's agenda. So I'm going to go right into it. We've got one apology from the executive, which is Josie Parkhouse. So she's poorly at the moment, and so I don't want people coming in spreading stuff around, and so she's doing the right thing by staying at home. And so if you're watching Josie, get well soon. So I've got the minutes of the 28th of November 2023. Are you all agreed that I sign those as a true record? Right. So those are signed. Number 4, we've got no local government part 2 items.
Declarations of interest. Item 3.
Yeah, item 3, declarations of interest. If anybody got any interest on any of these, please let us know. Public questions, we have none. And so we've got urgent matters, response to the government's consultation on the Home Office's consultation cap for sale and legal routes of asylum seekers. And I'm going to ask, this is a matter for noting and it's not a debate. And so I'm going to ask Lawrence Blake to explain. Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. There's no sellotape on my speaker, so I think I'm okay. I haven't broken it yet. So this was an urgent matter agreed under the emergency provisions, and the decision was in order to respond to the Home Office's consultation on the cap of properties that we would agree to accept under the safe and legal routes for asylum seekers. The deadline was such that the response had to be before the Christmas break. The response was facilitated by Devon County, with all second-tier authorities inputting the number of properties. In consultation with the portfolio holder, yourself and the chair of Customer Focused Scrutiny Committee, the decision was to facilitate 5 properties from the private sector for Exeter.
So that engineering working in. Thank you, Lawrence, for that. So that's just for noting, so we'll just note that, okay? Thank you. So I'm going to move on to, there will be a few changes to it. I think if you've got the agendas in front of you, you will note there are a few changes in the batting order, but we are going straight into number 7 now, which is the citywide net zero. And here we have 2 recommendations before us. I'm going to be asking, we've got David Bartram and Victoria Hatfield to speak to the paper. Who's going to back first for you two? Victoria, tell us all about it.
Thank you, Chair. So this report provides an update on an overview of citywide net zero and the City Council taking a leadership role in this activity for the next 2 years. This is utilising existing structures across the city and an existing budget from earmarked reserves. So a budget of 155,000 approximately remains for citywide net zero, which formed part of the £1 million budget for earmarked reserves. And this was specifically around delivering net zero. So it's proposed to use this budget to fund a programme manager for the next 2 years to lead on this activity. Some of my time will be spent supporting this work as well as the net zero team, but it's just to be clear that their focus still remains around delivering our own corporate net zero activity. And it's kind of like just to highlight that the City Council was just before Christmas nationally recognised by an independent review as being the second best district council in the UK for leading on net zero, and this was through the Climate Emergency Group. So we're hoping we'll be able to replicate that work for citywide net zero as well. To support this work on citywide net zero, we have also allocated some budget through Shared Prosperity, which gets updated to strategic scrutiny every 6 months. Next one is in March. And we are supporting a number of projects which would support citywide net zero in reducing carbon emissions in the city. And those are listed within the report. And it's around commissioning some work around EPC advisors, providing business support on greening your business, and supporting the Exeter Innovation Hub, which officially opens tomorrow across the road. and supporting Exeter College on their retrofit skills centre down at Soughton. Table in 9.16 section highlights the reporting structures going forward, which I mentioned, and these are broken down into 4 areas. And we're really keen to utilise existing structures rather than duplicate or set up something new. That was really clear what one of the focuses was going forward. So firstly, the area is around the Livable Exeter Place Board, and this new theme group will be established focusing on supporting the business community within the city on net zero. So these will meet on a regular basis and provide feedback and update to the Livable Exeter Place Board on activity being delivered. This group will be very business and infrastructure focused. So again, those theme groups are very focused on a particular area. So this work will be chaired by the portfolio holder for climate and ecological crisis, supported by myself and the new programme manager. The minutes for this meeting will be reported back to strategic scrutiny. So when we do our update every 6 months, and the first one will be in September, we'll provide the minutes of that theme group to strategic scrutiny. A representative from each of the organisations from the Livable Exeter Place Board, they'll be invited to join that group. It's not a requirement that they have to join, well, they'll be invited to join. And I'm just mindful that not all organisations across the city are on the Livable Exeter Place Board. So those ones that are involved with carbon reduction measures, they'll be invited to join as well. There'll be a representative from this group, the business group, that will also sit on the community group and vice versa. And again, we're doing that to avoid any duplication, making sure there's open transparency between the 2 groups going forward. The second area of work is around communities. So how do we support our communities and neighbourhoods to reduce their own carbon emissions? And it's proposed to establish a climate change group to support this work. And again, they will be chaired by the portfolio holder for climate and ecological crisis, and they will meet on a regular basis, yet to be decided, but likely to be every 3 or 4 months. The minutes for these, again, will be reported back to strategic scrutiny every 6 months. And we've been working for the portfolio holder for communities of homelessness on this piece of work to determine mapping and gapping analysis and who is the best organisation to kind of like feed into this piece of work. Thirdly is the work around county-wide work, and this feeds into the Devon climate emergency. And myself and Dave, we sit on the response group, which is more the strategic organisation, so lead in the Devon climate emergency, and the net zero team lead on the tactical group, and that's more around delivery. So we'll continue to attend the Devon climate emergency meetings. Historically, it's been more around developing the plans, so the Devon Carbon Plan and the Adaptation Plan. They're moving into their next phase of work now, which is actually around delivery of the Action Plan and the Adaptation Plan. So we will now focus on that piece of work around citywide net zero through the Devon-wide work. And lastly, there's a strand around the City Council, and this is where we'll be reporting into strategic scrutiny every 6 months, providing an update on citywide net zero. And this will tend to be the same time where we do our own corporate carbon emissions. So it's kind of chunk of citywide and City Council net zero at the same meeting. If there's any decision required on a particular project or a funding package, then we will bring those that discussion to executive for a decision. Over the last couple of months, I've been having lots of discussions with service leads within the City Council, and we've been talking around citywide net zero, of how they can be involved as well, because it can't just really focus on just the one team. It also involves a number of teams across the organisation, such as planning, waste and recycling, private sector housing, procurement, and monitoring air quality across the city. So it's about bringing services across the organisation together. I also now support the portfolio holder on the internal transport working group, and a few members around the table also sit on there. And we're revising the terms of reference for this group just to make sure that we can use our own levers that we have as an organisation to work on citywide net zero. And again, that is around the planning side of it, our own green travel plan, and then how we influence Devon County Council as a transport and highway authority, and also lobbying across the city on public transport, and also nationally. A few of the first actions that we will look to undertake once we've appointed the programme manager is around commissioning SWEG to up-to-date the citywide greenhouse gas report, so we can kind of understand where we are as a city, and also reviewing the Net Zero Exeter 2030 plan and developing an action plan subsequently for that. I'd say that's a quick overview.
Okay.
Questions?
Thank you, Victoria. Right, so before I come on to the members of the executive, leaders, this is your opportunity to speak to the recommendations and to influence what you may want us to think about in reaching our decisions. So, Councillor Jobson.
I'd like to thank Victoria very much for her report. There's a lot to take in there.
Thank you. Forgotten about that. I look forward to sort of hearing more about it, and particularly the minutes of strategic scrutiny and that. It was an awful lot to take in, so I have no questions at the moment. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I welcome both recommendations. My only concern, I think, like every citizen Exeter, that we're only 6 years off 2030 and there is a lot to do. And I think clearly we're now at a stage where we're looking forward to the action plan. And I would hope it has key performance indicators on a 6-monthly or yearly basis there, because we have to make progress and stop talking about this and having committees and more reports. We've got to start taking some action. So I'm hoping that shortly we will see an action plan with key performance indicators in that lead us up for the next 2 years when we got this person an appointment, but a clear review period at that time, because clearly we've got to look for additional finance, additional support within that period to sustain this through to 2030. And if we are serious about 2030 and not wringing our hands in 2029 saying, sorry, we didn't do it, we've got to have a clear action plan that takes us there, that the public can buy into, and businesses in the community and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I welcome attention being given to the coordination of citywide action. It's something that's been desperately missing, and we heard on Monday about how we need deep and urgent action. So the paper includes the various different groups and it lists assorted projects. And one of the things that I'd really like to see, and I'd hope the executive will strongly encourage, is a work plan which really focuses on the priorities for the projects which reduce emissions and also benefit our communities the most. In our climate motion we passed in 2019, the priority was to make sure that we benefited our communities. And so the greenhouse gas inventory, for example, was very clear that things like district heating had little relative impact compared to other things in relation to keeping people's homes warm and addressing issues on transport. So I really hope that maximising impact and widening the benefit is placed above commercial interests, and that we attract investment that will meet those priorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I'm going to open it up to any other members of the executive now who would like to make a contribution. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. I think it's a really good report and a very exciting, well put together plan. So really looking forward to the outputs of this. Thank you, Victoria. I've got a question about something that you mentioned at the beginning. Sorry, could you repeat it about something about us being leading in a second?
So
That's still in the lead as far as
there's
I've.
an organisation called Climate Emergency UK, and they check all councils across the UK to see how well they're performing in reducing their own corporate carbon emissions. And we came out second in the UK in terms of performance. And we did a press release on this, and I think it's a link to it in the report. And what we're trying to do is actually replicate that kind of work we've done for our own corporate carbon emissions for the city as well.
Right.
Sorry, thank you. And a question to arise out of that. Can you give us an example of one of the things that we have been doing within the council to reduce our emissions?
So a lot of the work has been around, I would say, our corporate policies on energy, so reducing our energy consumption to the grid, but also developing our own energy solar array across the city, which is now 3.4 megawatts.
our property and it's an event that we own, so it's about providing income, also giving us energy security and reducing our bottom line costs around how much energy we buy from the grid. That's been one of the areas that we're focused on that time.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just want to echo really the thanks for bringing this report forward. It's incredible. There's a load of detail in there about how we're going to deliver. And I think it's worth noting as well the scale of the ambition that's within this document. We're talking about 2030 on a citywide basis, when county-wide, even our district council colleagues are surrounding us that are run by Councillor Mitchell's colleagues are talking about 2050. So they're not even in the same ballpark with their level of ambition as what we are here in Exeter. And I think it's worth noting as well that the point that Councillor Wright was just drawing out there, that, you know, in terms of our council emissions, we're, you know, second best in the whole country. So we've got a track record there that says we're going to make ambitious targets, we're going to deliver. So we're going to get everything we can delivered to make sure that the city gets as close as possible to that 2030 target. And again, it's massively ambitious. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Wood.
I have sellotape. You should be behaving. Thank you. Okay. I'd just like to say that obviously, if Councillor Parkhouse was here, she would be able to contribute far more than I can. But I think one of the key things that I'm quite proud of is the work of this council in kind of leading by example, taking risks and, for example, retrofitting our housing stock. There's a learning process there, and that has led to the increase of the skills locally. It's been picked up by initiatives by Exeter College, amongst others. So I think it's important that we do actually deliver, because I think if you're going to lead an initiative like this, you have to be able to show your house is in order. We are taking action now in furthering what we did through Exeter City Futures. So as we heard on Monday, there's no single organisation from Exeter University, there was a presentation, no single organisation can possibly deliver on this. So this plan is taking forward and continuing the collaborative approach that was started by Exeter City Futures, but it's putting it into a more structured format. So we are working with the same key players within the city to try and move this forward. But as Councillor Pearce has said, this is we can't lose sight of the fact that we are working within a national framework which is aiming for 2050, a county framework which is aiming for 2050, with neighbours aiming for 2050. And to make a difference in this particular agenda requires a lot of investment. So what we will do is work with our partners to try and lever in as much funding as we can to learn and to share what resources and expertise we have. So I'm quite pleased to see that the level of detail within this plan. It does look at how we are going to deliver it, but also crucially, the plans that were put into action that we were working with was pre-pandemic. A lot has happened. And within this report, also going to go back to that start, review it, put it past our climate experts at the university, reshape the plan, and then deliver against that plan. So it's a great plan, and yeah, definitely support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other councillors wanted to come in on this? Well, yeah, I'll come to the officers. Nobody else? Okay, no, David.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I noticed there was a comment earlier about the fact that there's been too much talking and not enough action. So this council and on officers have been working really hard on reducing our carbon footprint over the last 10 years, before, even longer, before, this was net zero was even a thing, and we've made significant strides. And yes, there's been talk, and the group is new, but we've continued to work in the background on our own corporate property. The HRA team, as you mentioned, have done some fantastic work on retrofit. And I was fortunate to be at the last climate emergency forum with the county, and one of our housing officers was presenting our expertise on what we've done in terms of retrofit. And you could tell by the reactions from the other authorities, so there was all the other local authorities in Devon there present, they were really impressed by the work we've done. So, we're continuing, and our passive house building programme goes back tens of years. So we've made real strides in this area. It hasn't just been talking, it's been real action, and will continue to be so.
Thank you, David. And indeed, you're right about presentations, because I had the opportunity of seeing Lawrence and Adrian and Bournemouth at the LGA presentation, putting Exeter in the forefront of things, which was an excellent presentation there as well, by the way. And just to say that those remarks that you've made, Councillor Mitchell, and indeed you, Councillor Moore, I'll talk to the portfolio holder to see if some of that can be brought in where practical, because we want to have everybody on board. And it is disappointing that we're second and not first. So we've still got some way to go to get to become first. But I feel sure I'll read somewhere eventually that we're using the wrong sort of criteria or whatever, that we're really about 150th instead. But I'll wait and see all of that. So it is good work. Well, we'll be told that. It is good work being done. We can all see it, and I really hope that we can. I think we need to have that target of 2030. I think we can't give up. We've got to keep pressing ourselves. What the housing is doing with retrofit is first class. Of course, we want to do more. We always want to do more. And I'm going to have to mention it. And what we've done with St. Sybil's Point is excellent. And I was in contact with JP and indeed you today, Duncan, whereby people from Bournemouth extolling the virtues of our passive house in, I think it's a Lib Dem authority in with independent and a bit of green in there as well, wanting to come to Exeter, wanted to see what we're doing, how we're delivering it, and I think that's fantastic, and we will welcome them here from Bournemouth, as indeed with a lot of others. So there's a lot of good work to do, but we can't be complacent. I'm glad we're involving communities, that we're doing a good job. And for those of us who had the benefit of attending the presentation by Stuart Brocklehurst last evening from the university, I thought it was an excellent presentation, and I put that down on my form, on my feedback form. And also I should be in touch with Councillor Paul Knott, because I think that's an excellent pub quiz question. What does COP mean? And I've been asking people, a lot of people don't know what it means. So I'll leave it there. For those who weren't at the meeting, yeah, because you told him. So for those of you who didn't hear, perhaps if you can send me an email and tell me what you think COP means. No, don't do that, because I'll have thousands of emails coming in. Conference of the parties, which is important. And actually it was very, very, and not because a lot of us see that and we think, 70,000 delegates, really? Isn't that not helping at all? But I thought Stuart Brocklehurst explained it very well, and I'm impressed that he's going to a further meeting by train and actually sleeping in a tent and not spending money on a hotel. Very good. So we've got those two recommendations there. I'm going to formally move them from the chair. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much indeed. So we now move on to item 12. Am I following the order correctly? Yes, I am. Which is the update briefing on governance review working party. And here we have two recommendations. And Barn, if you could introduce the recommendations, please.
Yes, thank you very much.
And the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. I hope you can hear me quite clearly. So I was asked to bring a recap report which highlights the completed work of the Governance Review Working Group and the history behind it. Members, you might recall that in June 2019, the leader asked for the working group to be set up to look at the Council's constitution to make sure that it is still fit for purpose and working well. you will recall that the terms of reference were very clearly spelled out, and they're set out in this report, numbers 1 to 6 on page 102. And in particular, the highlights were the working group were asked to look at the size and membership of the executive, to look at the continuing appropriateness of the current committee structure, to review and amend any articles of the Constitution as may be necessary, to review the scheme of delegation as a consequence of that work, to review the Council's representation on outside bodies, and to ask the independent remuneration panel to consider the impact of any changes on members' allowances. Chair. So you'll see from the report that a report was brought back to the Executive Committee, or it was intended to come brought back to the Executive in 2019. However, a little thing called COVID intervened, and therefore there's a period where the work didn't convene until September 2021. And following that, actually, 3 meetings took place instead of 1, and they essentially confirmed that they were happy with the proposals, but there was a bit of mission creep, it's fair to say, and the mission creep that finally appeared in the report that was tabled recently and then removed was set out in 8.4 of the report on page 103, and you'll see that there are bullet points which summarise those. And I think it's fair to say the officers haven't forgotten those items, and we are still working on them, and we will absolutely at some stage come back to members and give members our view about them. So for instance, some of them, by the way, I should say, some of them have already been completed. So the first bullet point on page 103 was a discussion about the formation of strategic scrutiny subcommittee to review them and monitor the work of the climate emergency change. However, as you know, a meeting took place with the chief exec fairly recently, I think it was in December, and a way forward about what should we do and how we should do it has been agreed and is being implemented. The members were asking us to table questions. That's already in operation and working. We were asked to just consider a review of the outside bodies, because, as you know, we do nominate members to outside bodies, and we have a significant number of those. Mark has written to all of them. How many of them, Oliver?
I've had 19 responses back.
Yeah, but how many in total?
I think it's about 40.
Yeah, so there's about 40 groups or bodies. Only a few of them have responded, and we'll come back to you with a report to say actually, in the light of that, perhaps we need to shrink the nominations that we have to outside bodies. I've been asked to come back to members and do some training on councillors' responsibilities on the outside bodies, and I'll happily do that in time. And also we've been asked to look at the Lord Mayor's handbook, and also if and where it's deemed appropriate, we look at whether or not we look at the future timings of meetings. So in short, leader, what this report sets out is actually the terms of reference, the original terms of reference of the working group has been met, and report to confirm that took place and was submitted to council. There was a bit of mission creep, but notwithstanding that, the officers are working hard to make sure all the issues that were raised by members through the working group are being addressed, and a report will come back to members at some stage to deal with all those issues. So given that, I simply ask you to agree the recommendations. And I suppose I'll go backwards. So the first one is to give thanks to the Governance Review Working Group for their contribution in this, because they did work very hard on it, and just to note the content of the report. And obviously, if there are any questions, I'll happily deal with them.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
Chair, Laura, I'm actually interested in serving on this committee, not at the first stage, so I was totally unaware of the first point of proceedings, but its role was I came in the 2020 period, and on behalf of our group, we submitted 2 papers based on views about the Constitution and where tidying up or changes need to be made, and that's where, for example, the one about outside bodies has arisen from that. But That's only one of about 20 different views that we put forward at different points. There clearly needs to be a mechanism for us to review our constitution on a regular basis involving members from all parties. I think that is agreed. Whether a governance subcommittee is the appropriate way of doing it, my view is, looking at the constitution, having gone through all 400 pages X number of times, is that we do have an audit and governance committee, and if you look at some of its policy areas, they do relate to the constitution and governance of the council. And it seems to me that often there's been too much emphasis in that committee on its work on audit side of it and not enough on the governance side. So I would hope through just further discussions between the parties, we might come to a situation whereby we can consider a route in future which is a better forum to have discussions on any potential changes to the Exeter Constitution, which is essentially what the work of that committee should be about, to ensure that we're working correctly and properly as an authority. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I have 3 points to make on this one. I was interested to read that the pre-executive meeting in April had decided that there was mission creep. I'm not aware that myself as a co-leader or the members of the group were aware of that, or the chair in fact, because I'm sure they all acted in good faith. And as Councillor Mitchell said, we submitted a number of papers on the issues of the Constitution. So it is true that there is confusion. So I'm a bit concerned really. So I'd like reassurance that the outstanding governance issues about the effective working of this council will be addressed. So coming back to the point that Councillor Mitchell has made about the Audit and Governance Committee, the Constitution is rarely, if ever, on the agenda, and it is the case that Standing Order 18 doesn't apply to the Audit and Governance Committee, so there's no provision for committee members to be able to place anything on the agenda, so these issues don't get discussed. And a final matter, so with regards to the Climate Subcommittee, it must be made clear that the leaders did meet and we discussed the plans which you've set out in your earlier report. I didn't object, and I very much welcomed the involvement of the community of this. However, we're left with the situation that the Strategic Scrutiny Committee twice agreed that a subcommittee be set up in accordance with the powers it has under the legislation. So now this council will have to work out how to undo that decision, as it's not one that the executive can do.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jobson.
Thank you. As long as it seems to me that the liaising between the monitoring officer and audit and governance works, then it does seem that it's provided for in the report that constitutional issues come. So I'm sure that's a matter that that probably is being dealt with, but it does seem that perhaps at audit and governance we need to just remember that word governance is part of the committee structure.
Okay, thank you. I gave a bit of latitude there because you weren't necessarily talking to the particular recommendations, but I know this has been an ongoing matter and I wanted people to have their say. So I don't want to get into the whys or wherefores, whether we should, whether we shouldn't. Those are the recommendations. Over to members of the executive, please. Would you like to say anything? Councillor Morse.
First of all, probably thank you to the governance committee who, or the subgroup, who obviously had a very prolonged existence, larger than we all thought it would be when we went home on that day. We left this planning meeting having closed the Civic Centre and we didn't come back forever. So thank you to them, thank you for the work they've done, and also just thank you for the officers in, clearing up what was the objective of that governance committee and making sure that we came to the right end with that, but also I think the acknowledgement of the other issues that have come up in this report is really helpful and how we're progressing with them. So just thank you, really.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as Michael said, I was on that committee. I do have a different recollection of it from Councillor Moore in some ways, though, about that very long 2.5 hour meeting where I think there was mission creep, because we did start talking about the semantics of what the strategic
committees could do and wording as opposed to Devon County Council next to City Council. It's not 2.5 hours of my life I'll ever get back, but other things did come out of that that were useful. As Councillor Mitchell has said, I know you did bring extra stuff to the table that wasn't really within the remit of that, perhaps because we weren't sure of what the remit was perhaps at the time, but that did all feed in. Number 9 on the report does very clearly say that the Audit and Governance Committee will continue to monitor the Council's constitution. And I think if that isn't happening at the moment, then we just have to be clear that to request with the monitoring officer will tell us how often that would happen. Would it be an annual review, which is what I would imagine, and to make sure that that is on the agenda.
Thank you. Anybody else? Before I ask the officer, and perhaps, Barn, you'll be able to answer, how did we manage before 2019 to deal with amendments of the Constitution? That'll be something I'll come on to in a minute. How did we manage for all the years that the council has been in place to deal with things? So I'll give you a moment to think about that. So just to say, I'm quite clear. Councillor Mitchell, we had a meeting the other day. You were going to send me an email with some ideas. I haven't got it yet. So please do. Do you know what, leaders of the opposition? At any time, you can email me, the Chief Executive and or Democratic Services, if you've got any concerns about the Constitution, you would like to see some changes. You do not have to wait for a meeting that is not going to be arranged. A meeting of anything, you can do that at any time. You have an opportunity to discuss it. I've already given you an assurance on how we will bring forward any proposals that are coming forward. We dealt with some minor amendments only at the last council meeting and the last executive. And that's how we used to do it. That's how we're going to continue to do it. So there is not a governance deficit here. And it's within the papers that the monitoring officers, it's the monitoring officers' role. And ultimately, regardless of whatever committee, subcommittee, or wherever we discuss it, it is a matter for council, in which all 39 members of this council has an opportunity to say whatever they want to say. But we have created what I would call the usual channels for you as leaders to bring things forward. And I'd like to think we take these things in that way. So there's things in here, and you've mentioned about the executive, and I'm a bit concerned now, of which I will discuss with the Chief Executive on whether or not we have to unpick anything. I don't think we have to unpick any decisions. We've already made those decisions in relation to the committee, so I don't know what that is. And so, Councillor, please write to me to explain what you think we have to unpick to make sure this is right. A number of these issues, discussions about the Lord Mayor's handbook, at the end of the day, that is a matter for Democratic Services. That is a matter for Democratic Services to bring that forward, to be brutally honest, and that's where it must rest. Times of where we have meetings, that's always up for discussion. There's no, you could say we really need to discuss that at any time, and we'll have that discussion, whatever form that we need to have this in the appropriate discussion. So I think it's really important, and we've already got a mechanism for dealing with outside bodies. We've already got a mechanism. One, they come to the executive and to full council, but we've already said we've delegated it to myself and the leaders of the other groups. There is a mechanism in place. I don't know what we're trying to create here or what we would like to create. There is mechanisms for dealing with all these things. So that's how we take it. Those usual channels are there. You have an opportunity to raise with me, with the officers, with Democratic Services, any member of the council. Any member of the council can come forward. What I will say, what did come forward, which I thought was a good point, was about the facilities at the Guildhall. One member mentioned those. But all I would say about that is that, again, there are still opportunities to bring those matters forward. So I don't want it to be perceived that somehow we're not open to have any idea brought forward. We won't discuss, which is not correct. And I hope I demonstrated to that at a recent meeting. I had a recent phone call with you, Councillor Moore, afterwards, was I said, you asked for something, and I think we're going to do that. And I know you want to know how we're going to, and we're going to do it. So please bring it in that way. So I'll come back to you, Bon. How did we manage before 2019?
The same as we will continue to manage. So there's statutory responsibility to make sure that the Constitution is up to date, rests very much with me as a statutory monitoring officer. And as you know, we very regularly bring reports to full council that updates the Constitution in terms of reference, schemes of delegations, code of conduct. That's happened for many years and will continue. Because I've always said that the Constitution is a living document. It is not a static document. It will change because of legislation changes and our needs change, and so that will continue.
Okay, thank you. So we've got 2 recommendations there, which I formally move from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? Okay, all those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. So I'd like to move on now to item 12, which is the update. No, we've done with that one. I don't want to go through that again. I feel sure we will at some stage. Item 13. See, I can even have a laugh sometimes. Item 13, members training. We've got a recommendation that we note the report here. Bon, you're going to introduce it, and then I'll come to the portfolio order presently.
Thank you very much, Chair. It is really a pleasure to bring this report to members, and I just want to give my thanks to the members training steering group who worked with us to achieve the results that are tabled in front of you today. So since the last report, I can tell you that we've had 13 sessions, training sessions that is, with members, with an average attendance of 52%. Now that really, I say 52%, but that is a significant improvement over time. And I've got to thank members for that because they've really put some effort into attending the sessions that the officers take the time and trouble to present. If you look at Appendix A of the report, which is on page 11, you will see that we've had some really very well attended sessions where we've had 100% attendance, and they are the carbon literacy training. We've had 2 sessions of those, but followed close on its heels, we've had 2 other sessions, meeting procedures and rules of debate, where we've had 54% attendance, and training on GDPR of 54% attendance. So I would say I think that's a job well done, and long may it continue. The point here for me is it's not about the number, but also about the quality of the sessions that are being provided. And if you look at Appendix B, which is on 113, you will see that if my maths is right, 77% of the feedback forms that we've received from members show that they are either very satisfied or satisfied with the training sessions that have been provided, which I think is really good. But also there is room for improvement, and we'll absolutely strive to improve. So 45% very satisfied and 32% satisfied with the sessions that we have provided. And you'll see that on Appendix C, it also highlights the shadowing opportunities that we offer for members. And we absolutely will encourage members to attend those because it really gives members a flavour of the work, breadth and type that the officers do on a day-to-day basis. Chair, there's nothing else for me to say apart from ask you to note the report, and hopefully you agree that the training is on the up and the levels of satisfaction is on the up and the attendance is on the up. So for me, anyway, it's good news, good news, good news.
Thank you, Bon. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I just welcome the efforts and commitment made to training councillors. It's extremely helpful for what we're doing, and the shadowing opportunities are great fun. Thank you.
Councillor Jobson.
Nothing except to say thank you to all those, particularly the officers who give up their time to do those briefings. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
And thank you, and I'd like particularly to thank the planning one where we had the case studies, etc. The interactive training I think was extremely helpful to all members of the planning committee and to others to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open this up now to the end, and I'll come up to you at the end, Bob. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I echo everything that's been said so far. It's a great programme, and I think that what we also have to recognise is that we've got some extra sessions to what we had last year. So it's a really packed programme, and for example, we introduced some briefing on parks and green spaces, and also on city cleansing this year. I was really pleased to see there was a good attendance. Just one thing on the table on page 111, I think that some of the sessions, a small number, were just face-to-face. So where we've got post-attendance of naught, it's actually, it should just be left as a blank rather than naught, because it's not possible, because there wasn't a recording of the session, you couldn't have viewed it anyway. So perhaps just to make sure that we differentiate between those sessions that were online and through Zoom, and those that were actually face-to-face. Yeah, so it looks, yeah, because I would love to have gone to one of the planning ones, which I wasn't able, free to do face-to-face. But it's a great programme, and I would definitely encourage councillors who've missed out on participating in some of the sessions listed there that were online, and recordings exist, to get in and tick those off as done as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in? Councillor Wood.
Thank you. I'm lucky enough to have been in councillor for a number of years now, but I remember when I started, it's quite intimidating, the amount of information and understanding you're meant to have across a huge breadth of subjects, and this training is really essential. And through those years, I have seen the training programme adapt and develop, and it is getting better and better. But the training, I think, is crucial to councillors, especially new councillors, but even experienced councillors. Yeah, thank you very much for the training programme, and really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on this? Councillor Wright.
Just very quickly to echo all of those thanks, but really have seen a big improvement of not only our attendance, but the breadth of training, as everyone says, it has been offered over the last couple of years, and the work that's gone into that we know is huge from the officers' point of view. So I hope that with us being so well trained, that will make life easier for the officers, so that time won't have been wasted. But just quickly as well, the shadowing opportunities I've found particularly useful as well as part of that training. I am still due to go out in a harbour boat with Councillor Jobson at some point. We'll have to find a time when there isn't a storm and rebook it, but really useful. So thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? I'll come back to you at the end, Bon. Anybody else? Just to say, on page 117, this is the online training that does cost the council, but is very, very important. We need to get those figures up a bit, because you can do them, you can dip in and dip out, and it is a system whereby you can't progress to the next phase until you've answered the questions, and they move them around. So, as you try to remember what you said last time, they move it around. So it is quite clever in that way. That is important, because that will help, and it's very important, particularly the safeguarding one and some of the other issues. And Councillor Wright has mentioned the visits, and so has Councillor Williams. A couple of us went down to the Guild Hall around about September and had a tour of the Guild Hall to see the new jury room, how they done it and how they brought it around. It is fantastic. We were shown the cells. They let Councillor Moore and myself out, which was quite nice. And but it was a great opportunity, and we need those sorts of things, because there's a lot going on in this city and everything else. So that's very, very important. So yes, it's great. So fun.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to record my thanks to Jo Cornell, who works really, really hard. She spends a significant amount of time laying these on, coordinating the sessions and encouraging members to attend, and then chasing them up with their feedback form. So please, we really do like to hear from you after each session, because it allows us to evaluate how good those or bad those sessions were, and if we haven't got it quite right, then we work hard on making sure we do better next time. So please do feedback. Let us have the feedback forms, please. And it's just a note of thanks to Joe, who's not here today.
Okay, thank you. Before I go to the vote, Councillor Fole, do you wish to contribute?
Thank you, Chair. You're right, there's so many positive messages to celebrate. 45% very satisfied, 32% satisfied, to be applauded. But the 5% or 3% rise overall in the sentence by all councillors. I particularly like to thank the Councillor Development Steering Group, because of course their job is to look at the 25% of comments that weren't very satisfied, because that's what informs the way forward for us. And we've had two very good meetings, and the last one we had 20 responses from the 39 councillors, which helped us to weigh up what was happening. We did decide that we wanted a couple of the training modules to be monitored because there was a sameness about them. And lots of people echoed what Councillor Wood was saying about being inundated. I always likened it to being like a newly qualified teacher. You're suddenly thrown in the deep end and you're inundated with all this training. And we looked at the steering group at ways in which that could be spread out. And actually we drew a blank because there was just so much to be done. The other one was we were looking at areas of training, sort of bespoke training, if you like, for more experienced councillors or chairs, and whether that could be built in the future. But some excellent positive messages, which I endorse, Ben, and good work by the Development Steering Group Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fole. So we've got a recommendation to note the report. I'll move it from the chair. Seconder, please. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. We now move on to item 14, which is the Tenancy Policy and Strategy Review. Here we have a recommendation to adopt the report. And so I've got Ian Collinson and Lawrence. Ian, who's dealing with this? Lawrence, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. We're asking Executive to recommend for Council to approve the new tenancy strategy and policy for the period 2023 to 27. As a local authority, we are required to provide a tenancy strategy setting out our expectations of all social landlords that operate within our city boundaries. This includes ourselves as a stock retaining landlord, and the strategy indicates the types of tenancies that can be used, and if so, how they will be used by social landlords within the city. A copy of the tenancy strategy is included in the papers. In addition to this, we have reviewed the tenancy policy, which is our document setting out how we will deal with tenancies going forward. And the main change following the review and consultation is that we would ask members to agree to return to lifetime tenancies, retaining the use of introductory tenancies for 12 months at the start of all tenancies. To give some context to why officers are making that recommendation, we've issued over 1,000 fixed term tenancies during the period of the last tenancy policy, of which only 2% have come to an end because the review has led to the tenant no longer requiring the accommodation that they were provided. Happy to take questions and comments.
Thank you, Lawrence. Councillor Jobson.
Again, thank you for the report. The only, there are one or two issues I'd have in it, but I'll take those up. They're not suitable for executive.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. It was just that last point, I think, is the one to attempt. The idea of lifetime tenancies. I think that security for everybody in that situation is so good because it enables the tenant, if they don't wish to have, to make the decision on whether or not feel under any pressure from particularly the local authority. And I greatly welcome that move.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I very much agree, welcome the move away from fixed term tenancies. I just had a point about the survivorship policy because it's not quite clear to me in the report about to whom it applies. Is it just the other tenant or is it by status of relationship with the main tenant? So that for me was missing in the policy, which might be helpful to clarify before council. Thank you. And you've answered my other question I had before the meeting.
Thank you. Any other member of the executive before I come to Councillor Denning? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I think the point about the reverting back to lifetime tenancies is it's an excellent outcome. But I think it's based on evidence as well, and that was really heartening to see that you've actually done research and sort of looked at the statistics and realised it was not working as you thought it might in terms of trying to assess whether tenants might wish to move to sort of different sized homes and that sort of thing. So well done you for actually giving it a go and then carefully monitoring it and then coming back with an evaluation and revising our strategy as a result. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Denning.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy with the comments that's been made, particularly about the fixed term tenancies. It is something that Lawrence and I did discuss quite often. It's something, it does give security. It also means that people take more pride in their home. And we've noticed, even noticed that the gardens are made better because they know that they're going to be there for, this is a fixed term tenancy. So I have nothing more to say. I'm sure there'll be something else to say in the next item. So I'm just going to ask everybody to vote for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Denning. That is an interesting point about the survival policy takes on the tenancy, because many of us, I certainly have dealt with residents, because people don't think about this if they're living with mum and they've been caring for mum or dad and they're a child or whatever for a number of years. It's not in your mind about, well, I better get my name on the tenancy, otherwise people don't always think in that way, and it would be a bit churlish if they were, to be brutally honest with you. But then we do have problems after the event. So that would be, if you can't clear it up tonight, but it would be certainly if we could have some sort of clarification, because I think that's very, very important as well going forward. So Lawrence, if you can't answer it now, you can't, but if you can, please do so.
I'm happy to give it a go, Chair, although I suspect that there are so many different scenarios and and individual cases that it would be sometimes there are exceptions. If there is a sole tenant and the sole tenant passes away and they are married or having a person who's lived there for over 12 months, they will be assigned the tenancy. However, there are some exceptions where there are adaptations to the property that are over a value at currently at around £2,000, where that property can be best used for someone that would make better use of those adaptations. That doesn't mean that the surviving tenant or surviving member of the family would be evicted. We would assist that person to find alternative accommodation within our stock. There are other scenarios, but I don't want to get into too much detail, but happy to take individual circumstances or go through scenarios with you outside of tonight, Councillor Moore.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a recommendation here. I'm going to move it from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been.
Thank you. Item 15, council housing strategy, and here we have a recommendation that we note, and we ask council to approve this strategy. So who is it? Ian, is it Lawrence again?
Yeah, it's me again. Sorry, Chair. So the council housing strategy is a high-level overview of the council's priorities with regard to our housing service. Within the report, you'll see that we set out 5 key objectives, which is enhancing residents' experience, providing right homes in the right places, providing a value for money services, supporting our residents, and ensuring the safety of our homes and residents. I won't go into detail of the strategy, but just to say that the strategy sets out our current position, what our aspirations are, what we need to do to meet our aspirations, and then how we will measure those aspirations will have been met. Happy to take questions again, Chair.
Thank you, Lawrence. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank the officer for the report. There's only just one comment or a question really in relation to the table on page 151, which talks about the average private sector rent and shows a medium figure. It seems extremely low on the 1, 2 and 3 bedroom properties from what I see and is advertised and available in Exeter. And I just wonder where that figure comes from and if it is current.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I just wonder whether the executive might consider pushing some of these elements in this report a bit further. It says that there is a particular need for homes for older people and for single people, and that the council will be looking to include a similar replacement policy in the emerging plan with a percentage based on affordable housing and development viability of 35%. So will the executive be looking to ensure that there's a 35% target met for those homes built on brownfield sites in the new Exeter plan?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jobson.
I had similar queries as Councillor Mitchell with regard to the figures that were being used.
To find out.
Okay, with regard to the Exeter plan, I feel that must be a submission if you want to make, or your party wants to make. I fully accept that. We're not going to do that, but we'll review it. You know how I said we're going to review that. So that is the best avenue to take that forward, I would suggest. So I'm now going to
open this up to members of the committee. Anybody wish to make a contribution? If not, Councillor Denning, do you want to come in on anything?
Just really quickly, that it's been an excellent report. Okay, it has also been looked at by the tenants' voice, so it's the tenants' got a voice in that as well as the complaints and procedures committee. You know, it's gone through all of the process and has been scrutinised, and I think it's excellent. The 5 points that we've raised that was in the recommendation are of a real benefit to our tenants, and I ask the committee to support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lawrence, would you be able to tell us where we get that data from? I mean, if you can't, can't.
This is from the last local housing needs assessment, which is a couple of years old. So those figures will be updated as we refresh the strategy going forward.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence.
Yeah.
I'm going to move the recommendation from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much. And now I'm going to move right back to question 8. Just 1 moment. Item 8 is now the 24-25 budget strategy and medium-term financial plan. And here we have 1 recommendations. Dave Hodgson.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report setting out the framework for delivering a balanced budget for 2024-25, and also takes a look at the impact on the medium-term financial plan and the work we need to do to deliver balance across the next 3 years as well. So just to highlight some of the key issues, the local government provisional finance settlement early Christmas present was delivered on the 18th of December this year. Exactly the same as last year, there was a minimum funding guarantee of 3% for local authorities, and any local authority that did not receive the minimum of 3% was given a funding guarantee grant to make up to that level. I'm sorry to say that Exeter again received that grant, so without it we would have received significantly less than the 3%. And the grant this year totaled 1.173 million as compared to 843,000 last year. So a slightly bigger increase. In terms of new homes bonus, the settlement again allowed for a further year of new homes bonus, 1 year only again. The council received 485,000 this year, as opposed to 672,000 last year, so a slight reduction, hence the increase in the funding guarantee grant to offset the reduction in new homes bonus. In terms of business rates, again, the government have decided not to undertake any changes to the business rate regime, and as we await a general election, depending on the timing of when that general election is held, it's probably unlikely that there will be any changes to business rates for 25-26 either. And given the complexity and the fact that this government stated its intention to change business rates back in 2019, you can see the complexity and challenges that are involved, which make it quite a difficult thing for the government to implement. Council tax, the referendum principles have been set, and for district councils like ourselves, it is the higher of a less than 3% or a £5 increase in the council tax for the district councils. For Exeter, 2.99% is slightly higher than £5, and the budget strategy is based on an assumption that council tax will increase by 2.99%. Along with our collection fund surplus, if you approve it in the next paper, that would raise an extra £384,000 in council tax. What I would say, 3% increase in council tax, 3% increase in grant funding compared to cost pressures, which are in excess of 4% and beyond, gives you a scale of the problem. We're not even standing still with inflationary increases. So reductions have to be made year on year. If I could refer you to section 8.4, which is on page 44, you can see an indication of the challenges we have in terms of inflation. So whilst actually we made significant increases to our utility budgets last year, and part of the benefit this year has been the reduction in utility prices, so that's been built in, particularly in terms of gas. Pay award, which is a significant part, so pay is a significant part of a council's costs. The pay award we're setting at 4%, and we're setting it that high as an assumption because local government pay is set nationally, not by this council, and there are significant increases to the minimum wage, the national living wage, coming through from this government, and local government has to keep pace with that and prides itself on being an employer that's above the national living wage. So actually there's quite a significant catch up that needs to be done by local government to ensure it remains ahead of where the national living wage is, which is why we're expecting another high pay award increase next year. So in terms of the medium-term financial plan and the savings required for next year, actually it's been quite static across the year. So for much of the year, you will have heard me say we need £1.25 million of reductions to balance the budget. That's where we've landed, and that's the proposals that will come forward in February, and then on to full council on the 20th of February. As I've said to members many times, the real challenge comes in the next 3 years afterwards, particularly for the 25-26 budget. There's a need to identify a further £2.8 million of savings on top of the £1 million that we're already proposing in order to balance the budget in 2025-26. Now, the one big unknown is that there will be a general election between the time that we set this year's budget and set next year's budget, and that always creates a great uncertainty. No government will commit to spending beyond a general election, although there will be broad spending plans in place. So could be liable to change, unlikely to change significantly in our favour. Both the main parties are committed to similar spending plans, and therefore there is a significant amount of work that needs to be done in order to be in a position to deliver a balanced budget in the next financial year. In terms of the capital programme, again, I've talked to members extensively about the rising interest rates and the impact on the capital programme, and the fact that we can't afford to borrow anything further, because all that will do is increase that amount that you'd be required to cut from the revenue budget. And therefore the capital programme that is proposed is predominantly schemes brought forward from this financial year into the new financial year. The only exception to that is a range of IT projects, new IT projects that we need, particularly a replacement programme for our laptops. So some of the laptops that our officers are using are up to 8 years old and are well beyond their useful life. And therefore we need a sustained programme of replacing laptops going forward. We'll have to find capital receipts to fund that, and therefore officers will be working on a programme to identify ways of delivering capital receipts. There will be, it's not in the appendix to this, but there will be 3 small additions to the capital programme which purely relate to a change in accounting practice, but it moves a number of leases that we currently pay for from the revenue account into a capital project. So you will see them. I will highlight them in yellow so you know they're different to normal things, because they will say they're coming from borrowing, and they are technically coming from borrowing, but they're repaid annually from the amount we would normally have paid out of revenue. So it will come out of, so rather than going to the company direct, although the payment will be made to them, we'll be using it to offset the liability on the balance sheet created by this capital project. But it's purely a change in accounting practice. It's not an additional item of spend. And I don't have anything further to say, so I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We saw at last council about the issues in relation to the capital asset programme, and I just want to know at what stage does this programme delivery become critical? And the second point is around the auditor's report, which recommended that the council consult on the budgets. So in light of the 6.9 million funding gap over the next 3 years and associated cuts, this is even more crucial. So it's the auditor's report of last year, in case you're wondering. And so I'm wondering when the executive plan to explain its priorities and the impact of the proposed cuts to the residents and businesses of Exeter.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jobson.
No comment or questions, just thank you for the detail in the report.
Councillor Mitchell.
Always can we thank Dave for the clarity of his report for us working in these sort of mega bucks in most of our lives. Just one general point on the medium-term strategy. I'm concerned that in the resource element, we're showing business rate income remaining stable or relatively stable for the next 5 years, going up to 2027, 28, the end of this period. I'm somewhat concerned at what the worry is with the new government or whatever flavour it is up post-elections. They've all talked about business rate review for year upon year upon year. And I just wondered that as that almost represents getting on towards 50% of our income, whether we might need to have to revisit that in relation to any government decisions, and whether there's anything on the horizon in regard to business rates.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell.
And the second point, second and final point, in relation to borrowing, we're showing over the next 2 years that we're borrowing approximately 1.7 million to improve our car parks or bring them up to standard or do work on the car parks. is the intention that's an hypothecated borrowing, or is it one that the general ratepayers will pick up the bill for?
Okay, thank you. Is there any other member of the executive wish to make a comment? Councillor Fowle and then Councillor Pitt.
Dave, you've been sounding the death knell of the new homes bonus for a number of years now. Is it simply been worn away to the point year on year that it's going to disappear, do you think?
We'll deal with that in a minute. Can I go through? We'll come on to that at the end, Bob. Councillor Pierce.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to echo really the thanks for Dave for this presentation. And I'm always astounded by the numbers. I think they look enormous at times, but then our council tax take is literally the lowest in the country for a district council. And I think it's absolutely incredible that for 55 quid a head per year, we manage to deliver the sort of services that we do. It's incredible. If we were to look at some of our comparator councils, like say Gloucester, they get nearly £2 million a year more in council tax take. And that's an incredible burden for the residents of Gloucester when we've got a 70-year high tax take currently anyway. So I wouldn't necessarily want to see an increase in our council tax for the residents of the city, but I think it's worth noting that we are, as a district council, incredibly low, one of the lowest in the country. And when that bill lands on the doormat in April, the lion's share goes to Devon County Council, who can increase it by more than what we can, 5% instead of 2.99 or 3%. And then there's a big chunk for fire and police and NHS as well. So we get a very small slice of that. I just think it's worth reiterating that fact that we do an incredible job for 55 quid a head per year.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you. I've just got two questions of clarification, Dave. First is on page 44, where you've got that table, and I was going to ask you about the 0% inflationary increases. You've already explained the electricity and water one, the services one. Can you just explain the general inflation one at 0%? So that's the first one. And the other question I had was on Appendix 3, page. Hang on, I've got it here. Page 54, where you've got where you're looking at the source of financed by, and there's a lot of borrowing there. Although some are qualified, where you look to see if we could get contributions. I assume that will be the same for most of those borrowings, where if there's an opportunity to bid for some money, we will take every opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay, Dave, if you can deal with new homes bonus, we'd all be interested about how we sort of get some money. With some other issues that the leaders mentioned, I would remind everybody that we've got a meeting in 2 days' time, which we'll be going through. And then obviously the issue about consultation, which I believe we do intend to do, and all that will come out at that meeting. So all the councillors will know on how we're going to be taking budget proposals forward, of which we will hopefully have the support of the majority of citizens in Exeter, and who knows, even the opposition parties on this occasion. So Dave, if you can answer those few questions.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of new homes bonus, you're right. The government announced its demise probably around the same time as the business rate review was implemented, so 2019, and it's still hanging in there. The reason ours is lower than last year is we've built less houses this year, so the methodology for sharing the money hasn't changed. It's just slightly more challenging house building conditions nationally, so we've received less money. I'm not a betting man, but if I was, and given that there's a general election next year, I bet I might be talking to you about new homes bonus again next year, even though the government tell me that they will review it this year. I think, given the nature of a general election, new homes bonus is probably not going to be the highest priority on a government either going out or the new government coming in. So it remains. In terms of the inflation rate, so General inflation at 0% is a tool often used by evil finance directors to keep down costs, and we do use that here. We've used it for quite a number of years. What it's important for us to not do is to give zero inflation on things that have a contractual commitment, because if you are in a contract where there's a 3% increase year on year, it's ridiculous to put 0% on, because they'll just overspend. So we try to use it to keep down costs and stop bigger reductions being required from service delivery. But we do try to do it in a sensible way. And in terms of the borrowing, so all the borrowing, with the exception of these three that will be highlighted in yellow, all that borrowing is built into the medium-term financial plan. It's prior year capital projects that have been approved where the borrowing has been built in. So it is tough, and absolutely, if any opportunities come to bid for funds to deliver that, then we will certainly seek to do that. In terms of trying to identify and generate capital receipts, we obviously, as members are aware, have a number of other priorities that, whilst they may have been approved, aren't actually in the capital programme yet, because we can't afford to deliver them, and therefore there's a priority order to the way we use newly created capital receipts. But yeah, absolutely, if the opportunity comes to bid, we will bid.
Thank you, thank you, David. So there's a recommendation before us. I'll move the recommendation from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? Okay, all those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. And we come on to item 9. Dave's alluded to some of it. There's 3 recommendations.
We've got too many microphones switched on.
Yeah. Item 9, we've got 3 recommendations here. Council tax base and the NNDR1 for 24-25. Dave Hodgson again.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have an extra recommendation this year, because we're proposing to increase the collection rate that we use to calculate the tax base. So in terms of the tax base as a whole, the gross tax base has topped out over 40,000 for the first time in our history, and there's a recommendation to increase the collection rate to 97.5%. That will generate a tax base of 39,045 for the year 24-25. We use a collection rate because we're realists, and we know that not everybody will pay 100% of their council tax, can't afford to pay 100% of their council tax, and therefore we make an allowance for those that won't pay. The 97.5 isn't an in-year collection rate target. It is the amount you expect to deliver over the life of the debt, and if you call it a statutory debt, council tax, so it has a lot greater life than a normal debt would have. We decreased it to 97% back in 2013 when local council tax support was introduced, to reflect the fact that some people who weren't paying council tax previously would have to start paying, and there was an expectation that there would be an increase in debt write-off. As we go along, our level of council tax support scheme clients has reduced, and we're beginning to see a consistently high surplus on our collection fund year on year. So increasing the council tax simply means that the surplus that we collect, which is spread out between the preceptors the following year will be spread out between the preceptors in the year that it's collected. And I'm confident a 0.5% increase is about 500,000. We're consistently between 1 and 1.5 million in terms of a collection fund surplus at the moment. Obviously, it's something that we'll monitor to make sure that we don't continually go into deficit, because there's nothing worse than coming to members and saying, actually, I've just increased the amount you need to reduce your budget by because we've got a huge deficit on the collection fund that we've got to pay back. So we will absolutely keep it under consideration, but I'm really confident that we'll be able to deliver to a 97.5% collection rate. As with every year, the business rates have to be completed by the end of January. We await a software update from Capita, as we do every year, to deliver the NNDR1, and therefore I'm asking for delegated responsibility to ensure that that's completed and sent to the government and the other interested parties, the Devon Pool, Devon County Council and the Fire and Rescue Service by the statutory deadline of the 31st of January. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Dave, Councillor Jobson.
No, again, thank you for explaining that report. It's most helpful.
Councillor Mitchell.
Same again, thank you.
Councillor Moore. Any other member of the committee? Okay. Well done, Dave. All those in favour of the three, I'll move the recommendations from the chair. Can I have all those in favour, please show?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much. We now move on to item 10, housing rents and service charges 24-25. And on this, Dave, again, can you talk us through the three recommendations and your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, 3 recommendations with a remarkably similar number attached to each of them. So this is the proposal to increase housing rents, and we also include garage rents and service charges. So the rents of council dwellings is stipulated by government policy, and we are allowed to increase by inflation plus 1% year on year. The CPI, the relevant CPI figure for September 2023 was 6.7%. So we're proposing an increase of 7.7% from the 1st of April, and we are mirroring that, or recommending mirroring that for garage rents and service charges as well. Just as a bit of background to remind you, councils that have a housing revenue account that look after council housing are still contending with the 1% rent cuts that were introduced between 2016-17 and 2019-20, which took £7.9 million over a 4-year period from the HRA. And of course, the HRA is a self-financing account, so any income that it loses is income it can't reinvest in the properties that the tenants live in. That is predominantly what the money is used for, and for managing the service. Last year, the government changed that policy for 1 year only, because if they'd have allowed an inflation plus 1% increase, that would have resulted in an increase of 11.1%. So they capped them at 7% last year. What I would say, our costs increased by double digits. I mean, you know, we suffer inflation as well, and rents were capped, and that resulted in a reduction of about £800,000 for the year, 2.5 million over 3 years. So, you know, we are playing catch up in terms of our income, as Councillor Pearce alluded to in talking about council tax. We're a low council tax income receiver. We're also a low income receiver for council housing. So with the same analysis that we did for council tax, for housing rents, we were the second lowest in terms of the amount of income received per property. So it's a challenge between having sufficient income in order to be able to maintain and keep people's properties whilst ensuring that rents remain affordable. So the proposal is 7.7% across the board for dwellings rent, garage rents and service charges, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. We're coming second in a lot of things lately, aren't we? Councillor Mitchell.
I'd like to thank David for the report. No further comment.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. You helpfully set out in the report that the most of the that the rise in rent for those on universal credit or housing benefit will be paid for by that. What analysis of risk in terms of non-payment have you made of those on low incomes who are not in receipt of benefits in terms of non-payment and their ability to afford these rent rises? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jobson.
No, just thank you for the report.
Okay, any other member of the committee would like to speak? Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Just a question, silly question. On point 4, part 4 of the report, are we taking that we're not changing our rent policy because our rent policy is already anyway that we would have a rent increase of 7% plus 1%? No, sorry. 6.7, thank you, plus 1. So is this just sort of clarifying that rent increase is going to happen? We're not deviating from the rent policy that we put into place previously. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Roll up the questions at the end.
Any other member of the executive? Councillor Denning.
I'd just like to say, nobody likes to put anybody's rent up, but it's a case of if we want to keep our homes well maintained and whatever, then it has to be done, and I think it's fair. I've done my usual thing of going around to different places, some hostelries, can I say, talking to some tenants and whatever, to see what they think about rent rises and the figures. They actually understand that if they want to have a retrofit or if they want new windows, that their rents will indeed have to go up because they understand that there is a cost of living. Quite rightly, the local housing allowance is going up. That will cover the rents. But what I will say also, one of the things that I think will help us, David, in the respect is that the rent collections are going over into the housing, and the housing officers will know those. They will pick up on the people that perhaps have a problem, so that there will be some form of safety net in that respect. And being a council tenant myself, all I can say is it's good value for money, because if I need a repair, I just call out somebody. And like my sister, who's just had to pay an inordinate amount of money to get a new window put in. So I would say, please support these rises in the rent.
Thank you. Yes, Dave, so a couple of issues about the policy. Are we following our policy, agreed policy that Councillor Wright? And is there a quick response to what Councillor Moore, or do we need a more detailed response if we can? Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of this, it's completely in line with the government policy, which we have followed for a number of years, many years. So it's exactly in line with that policy, no deviation. In terms of setting the rent, then whilst we set the rents for the individual properties, when we set the budget for the income to the HRA, then assessment is made of the potential for bad debt. So just like council tax, there will be a range of bad debts, and arrears are generally rising slightly in the HRA and therefore we have to make provision for that. So we don't multiply the number of properties we've got by the rent that they'll receive and say that's the income you're going to receive in the HRA. There is an assessment made to reduce that, to accept that there will be bad debts.
Thank you for that, Dave. So we've got those recommendations there. I'm going to move them from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That those have been carried.
Thank you very much. Now move on to item 11, which is the approval of Devon District's procurement strategy. And we have a recommendation here that we recommend it to full count that council approves this. Dave Hodgson.
That's in my comfort zone, Chair. So could I invite Chanel as service lead for procurement to introduce this item? Thank you.
Chanel, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report requesting approval of or adoption of the proposed procurement strategy, which was contained within the papers. It's the fourth iteration of a joint strategy with the other Devon districts. It sort of reflects the work that the national procurement strategy that's been updated a couple of times since our last strategy was put together. So the themes within the new strategy reflect what is sort of being recommended nationally in terms of procurement and our areas to focus on, which hopefully also reflect what Exeter is seeking to sort of focus on as well. And it's also covered in this report some of the outcomes that we have achieved since during the term of the previous strategy, which includes agreement from SMB to roll out contract management training across the council, including KPIs in all tenders for better management of contracts, including 5% weighting of social value as a minimum in all contracts, 5% weighting on sustainability in all contracts as a minimum, ongoing support of local supplier engagement events, and I've just gone to the wrong page, there it is, getting all tender activity signed off at the appropriate level, depending on the value of the contract now happens, and we are engaging the market in advance of going out to tender more regularly through pre-procurement engagement now as well. So that's just a summary of some of the things we've delivered during the period of the previous strategy. There are some risks identified in there which are hopefully fairly easily mitigated, and I think the strategy, hopefully you've seen it and it's quite self-explanatory. I'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the updated strategy. I just want to talk about this in terms of climate change, because climate change is referenced in the report in terms of creating social value, but the scoring is actually quite low. And if you look at the toolkit that's mentioned, the government procurement toolkit, it only mentions climate once, and it certainly doesn't reference net zero. So in terms of these recommendations to council on our priority for net zero, I would be very keen for the executive to assure council that net zero will be achieved through this procurement strategy, so our scope 3 emissions, and I'd like to know how this is going to be monitored and progressed by all the partner authorities as part of this, because it doesn't come across very strongly, I'm afraid, and it is one of our council priorities.
Thank you. Councillor Jobson.
Thank you. Let's talk in the strategy about engaging councillors. Is that likely to be done by way of a members' briefing? Is just the comment I'd like to make.
I was looking at the page with a nice photograph of Gandy Street, and you're quite right where it says about I think we can look at that. Councillor Mitchell.
I would just like some elaboration. This is a joint strategy document, in other words, to which all authorities have signed up to. To what extent is there inter-authority procurement policy for actually delivering value for money to save us money in the long term by joint procurement rather than a policy that we all share?
All right, thank you very much. Can I have any other member of the committee? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on the point that Councillor Jobson's just made, because I was going to ask about this. And in the Devon document, there's quite a bit saying it's really important that councillors are trained in this important area. So I think that's something maybe that we need to think about, because we're not doing that at the moment. So yet another training session. Looks as if it's on the cards. And I just got one question I wanted to ask. It's in section 10, right at the bottom on page 80, where you've got all tenders include a minimum of 5% weighting on social value. Could you explain how that is measured?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wood.
I'm really pleased to see this coming through in this format. I think procurement, we often think of procurement as, how can we get the best value for money, which is part of its role, obviously. But I think one of the things that comes out through this document, 3 bullet points in the introduction: showing leadership, behaving commercially, which is getting value for money, but achieving community benefits. And I think that's key. There are examples across the country where the procurement practices of the larger organisations have had key impacts on the recovery and the how well the community's finances, the finance for the area covered, that can really benefit. And I think that it's good to see that there's this level of partnership across the authorities to make as much as we can while saving money and getting value for money, also supporting our local businesses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have we got any other further questions? Councillor Fold, do you want to come in on anything? No, that's it. Yeah, quite right. Thank you, Councillor Fold. Nobody is obliged to speak. Thank you. Just before Chantal, because I know you're sort of put into the Lion's Den here, with regard to the carbon footprint, I'm looking at item 14 of the report, and also with Councillor Mitchell's remarks about Councillor 15, whether or not in relation to, because to me it's make it quite clear that we're creating social value. That's interesting what Councillor Williams said, but it is part of our action plan coming forward. We're going to deal with it. So without getting down any rabbit hole on that or the other one, if you need to just clarify that in any minutes coming forward, because there will be a discussion at full council about that, about the climate action, and also is this just a policy that sits on the shelf, or are we actually working with other local authorities? Is some of Councillor Mitchell's. If you can answer those quickly, that'd be
I'm happy to respond. Yeah, so I would just highlight this is a sort of quite a high level strategy, and finding it being too prescriptive and detailed around what we're going to deliver when you've got 4 different organisations with 4 different sets of kind of priorities sat around the table is quite difficult. So it might feel that the strategy is quite high level in terms of the commitments, but as is mentioned in here, each individual council will make their own action plan under the strategy, which will then detail what they're going to deliver. So for us, obviously, we work, but the procurement team work closely with Victoria's team in the carbon net zero group, and we've got a task and finish group looking exactly how we're going to deliver carbon reduction through our procurement. So there is a clear definition of that. It's just not captured in the strategy because, as I say, that wouldn't be appropriate necessarily for other organisations who perhaps don't have those teams in place. And the other point was working together. Yeah.
You've explained.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So there's the recommendation before us. So I'm going to move that from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you, Mark. We now move on to item 15, which is 16. Yeah. Oh, yes. 16, please. Yeah. Which is a review of the safeguarding policy, and here that we're recommending to council that we approve the revised safeguarding policy. And again, Melinda, you're always kept to the end. I mean, you need to complain about that. Well, we had a meeting. So, Melinda, please talk us through the recommendation and the policy, please. Or the changes, because we've got this, that we focus on what has changed as a consequence of this policy. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, in brief, I mean, these are set out in the report, but in brief, so this is a safeguarding policy which is in regards to children and young people and adults with care and support needs. So, apart from general updates in terms of job titles and things like that, we have removed the need for a central record on safeguarding now because we felt that that was actually duplicating effort for officers. And when we've actually gone back to ask for information, for example, if there's been a serious case review, then we find that officers always have that information. So we didn't feel that we needed to keep a central record. We've added in a section around listening and taking account of the views of children, and reference to Section 11 of the Children Act, which those are requirements of Section 11 and the Working Together statutory guidance. We've included in Section 7 the extremist speaker protocol, which is also an appendix at the back of the policy. So dealing with extremist speakers who may be using our venues or our land as part of events planning. A section on corporate parenting responsibilities also been added, and so corporate parenting relates to care leavers and our responsibility around young people who are care leavers. We've also added another section on dealing with requests for work experience from young people and also employing people under the age of 18, just to make sure that we tighten up our processes. Another section has been added in relation to the local authority designated officer. They sit with Devon County Council, and that is where if there's been a referral around a member of our staff and an accusation around their behaviour with young people, then that needs to be referred to the local authority designated officer, the LADO. So we've just included that process in there. And then finally, Section 12, we've included is our policy around training of staff and members around safeguarding. That's it. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Jobson.
No, it covers all the.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Members of the executive, I know I'll come to you in a minute at the end, Bob. Councillor Wright. I'll come to you at the end, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Wright.
So I thought you were telling me to sum up,
No,
which
no,
would be
no,
difficult.
that's not
Because, yeah. Okay. I've got to admit, I'm really not keen on the fact that you're removing the central records relating to safeguarding. This is good practice across the board to do that, because I totally take your point that you're saying that, and I'm sure they absolutely are, really good records are already being kept. But for instance, if there was something to do with safeguarding, which that report was then actually held within housing or licensing or somewhere else, it's not in that place where all the safeguarding reports should be. And it's a little bit concerning as well to say it was originally flagged as a requirement by audit, but we've still removed it. I'm absolutely confident, as you are, there's excellent record keeping, but I don't actually think that we should be removing a central safeguarding base, I'm afraid.
Okay, Councillor Morse.
I think mine's slightly less scary. The obligation of city councillors to become corporate parents has been a more recent development, and I was a corporate parent for Devon County Council, and I went on at least 20, it felt like, training courses to let me know what that actually meant, because I think it's a nice word that we're all hearing, but what does that mean, our obligation? So I'm loath to do this because we're at something every night this week, and it feels like we are for the next 3 months. But I think we probably need to be trained, because you can't expect us to be a corporate parent when we don't know what it is. So if you could arrange some training for us, that'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anybody else? Councillor Fole, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Melinda. Unfortunately, you got a sharp intake of breath from two retired head teachers, so we're sort of conditioned into safeguarding being a central plank of Ofsted inspections. I'm also aware that we have colleagues who are county councillors who have nightmares about safeguarding. It's not been a tickety-boo with the county for some time. So I think I share Laura's concern. Maybe we're out of date, I don't know, but I share Laura's concern that the removal of a central record would leave us open to criticism in the future.
Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to withdraw this item now, and we'll look at that. We've got an executive on the. We've got a special executive coming up on the 22nd of January, and we'll put it on the agenda then. Are we all agree with that? Thank you. So,
just to defer the matter to.
Well, I've ruled from the chair, but I'll get a vote to help it along, and we'll just be able to discuss that then. You see.
Thank you, Chair. Just confirmation for the minutes.
Okay. Thank you. So we now move on to item 17, which is the review of the policy dealing with unacceptable customer behaviour. We've got a recommendation here that we would put to council. So can I ask Melinda to come in on that one, please?
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is an update to an existing policy. In brief, items that we've changed, we've added in reference to the council's social media house rules in recognition that those staff dealing with social media are also are on the receiving end of some unacceptable customer behaviour. We've developed, or there is in train to develop a message that will go on potentially on emails and on the telephone system that reminds customers to behave respectfully towards staff. We've also included reference to the policy on body-worn cameras so that those two policies, this policy and that, reflect each other. We have also included a section where if reflect where if a perpetrator of unacceptable customer behaviour, a customer who is behaving unacceptably, also has another relationship with the council. So whether that's a member of staff, whether they might be a tenant, or they might be a licence holder, that we have different processes for dealing with those situations in alignment with the unacceptable behaviour policy. We have also removed a section which gave an appeals process for someone who has been added to the Employee Protection Register, and we propose instead to deal with that through the usual corporate complaints procedure so that we're not having to duplicate processes. We've also added a section where the customer who is behaving unacceptably is actually under 18, so that we have a separate process for dealing with that. So, for example, where with adult customers, if they're on the Employee Protection Register, we review those in a maximum of 12 months. With young people, we'll put that as a maximum of 6 months, and then also align that with any other procedures to deal with that, such as antisocial behaviour. And then we've also included a section just to add emphasis on the support for the staff who may be victims of unacceptable behaviour by customers. Have to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I just wondered if Melinda could outline to what extent this is an issue. You know, are we talking about, I would just hope a handful of individuals over many years, and what relationship do we have with the county council? Because the same individuals who are interacting with us might interact with a higher level authority, and to which way there's communication in both ways to make our staff aware of potential issues.
Okay, Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a very difficult area, and abuse of council staff is not acceptable. However, some people who present with very challenging behaviour do that for very complex reasons, which we know. So I'm just wanting to know, in terms of having an ability to appeal, it's a little bit different from making a complaint. So what, and quite often people present with such behaviour, some aren't able to deal with systems and processes. So how will they have access to that system and able to have a fair opportunity to have their situation assessed? Because fundamentally it's about their ability to access services, and I do know that council staff try their utmost to ensure that people do get access to services despite some very difficult behaviours sometimes. So just wonder if you can address how that will happen. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jobson.
No, thank you.
Okay, members of the committee. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Jan. I noticed at the bottom of page 208 where you've got a couple of footnotes that you've defined council staff includes employees, secondees, internships, volunteers, temporary staff and contractors. And I wondered where councillors fitted into this, because sometimes when we do have unacceptable behaviour, it can be towards officers as well as councillors who are working alongside them. And I just feel it's quite important that councillors should be covered by this as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? So Melinda, very, very quickly, it's how do we work with other, not just the county council, the police and anybody else where these people may become involved with? I'm assuming we've got organisations we can work through. You can briefly explain that. Is there an appeal process and can people appeal? We just need to understand if there is or there isn't. And then obviously it's as the remark that Councillor Williams came up, how do councillors who deal with some troublesome people, who would I complain to if I had troublesome people to deal with?
Okay, thank you. I might work backwards on those. So, Councillor Williams, in terms of councillors are part of this policy. That's just footnote, is just explaining what we mean when we say staff. That we mean a number of different contracts within that, so volunteers, etc. In terms of the extent of the issue, so we have currently about 68 people on the Employee Protection Register, and a lot of those are classed as, we have a risk register, and a lot of those are classed as being high risk. But we have a Safety of Employees review group which meets on a monthly basis, and we, as the name suggests, we review those cases. So we have new cases coming to us. Anything that goes on the Employee Protection Register comes to that group, and we discuss those cases, and we also review any cases and remove them from the register if they're there unnecessarily, assessing again the risk, or we may downgrade those. We also look at the safeguarding issues at that meeting as well, and if we don't feel that someone's getting support, then we might refer that back to the officers involved to try and seek support from other agencies. We do have, in terms of relationships with other authorities, not just the county council, but other voluntary sector organisations as well. And so we will share information, and the police. Sometimes we actually get information from the police about particular customers. So we do have that relationship. We do share information. I don't know that I can talk fully about the complaints process, because that's something that I'm not necessarily strictly involved in, but I understand that it would be possible to have advocacy with that. So, and as I say, we do pick up safeguarding issues. So I think, I think we probably would need to get an answer.
Right, Melinda. So I feel a further briefing coming on, and I feel that perhaps it could be incorporated with the safeguarding, because there are some things, and that perhaps, and I don't know whether or not you want to, because yes, does this, because there are many documents that refer to staff and not to councillors, and so we need to understand, are we now saying hereinafter on all policies for staff read councillors as well? I don't know. So we may want to clarify that, just make a line. Bindu.
So through you, Chair, we are looking to list all of our policies that the council operates under and be really clear which ones apply to councillors and which don't, and make that explicit in the policy.
That's a good, thank you very much. But I think it would help if we had if this was merged up with that other briefing session, so we could talk about appeals process, how we work with others, and that David, you wanted to come in.
The appeals process is really quite simple. So if somebody's appealing or somebody makes a complaint, they have to follow a process. So we have to have some way of documenting their complaint or their appeal. And all we're suggesting here is, rather than having a separate way of doing it, we just use the custom complaints policy, because it's really well used, it's monitored, and it just makes it simpler for everybody. So it's, rather than duplicating effort, just use the same process we already have.
Okay, thank you very much. So we got the recommendation there, which I'm going to move from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please?
I have a question, but I'll leave it. Sorry. Sorry. Yes, I second it.
Yeah. Moral of story, put your hand up and then you'll come in. All those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you. And now move on to the last one, which is the review of equality and diversity policy. And here we have a recommendation again that goes to council to approve and adopt the revised policy. Melinda, again, please.
Thank you. Yes, so again, this is a policy that already is in place, but there are updates to it. The first one being that the policy title has now changed from equality and diversity policy to equality, diversity and inclusion policy, which is in line with other local authority policies in terms of the terminology. The scope of the policy has been updated so that it now very simply reflects the 9 protected characteristics under the Equality Act, rather than a wider range of protected characteristics. And this is to reflect the equality impact assessment process that we have to undergo, because if anything, if we have a wider scope of policy, any protected characteristics that we wish to add into that scope would need to be picked up in terms of the equality impact assessment process. So that has been limited to those 9 protected characteristics. There's also been included, we've adopted the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism. We've also included an anti-racism statement to be adopted. And we've also included another section, section 7, a process for dealing specifically with complaints of discrimination. So a slightly separate process it will be part of the main complaints process, but just a slightly separate working where that is escalated because of the nature of discrimination.
Okay, thank you. And before anybody says it, I can feel another briefing session coming on. But I would add, go on that SSS training, much of it is dealt with there, but obviously I think we need a City Council bespoke one. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. I welcome this update, and particularly the anti-racism statement, which is something I believe came out of the recommendations from the Buller Working Group. So that was good that something's happened as a result of that. It's interesting, the section about identifying improvements, and it says it goes to the SMB on a quarterly basis. So how will councillors get to hear about progress of this work in terms of things that are working well and things that might need to do better, other than through updating the strategy every few years? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jobson.
No, thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
No, thank you.
Any other member? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Just on page 222, section 8, the 4th and 5th bullet points, you refer to paragraph 4.8 and 4.9, and I think you mean 4.7 and 4.8. Just a couple of typos there. Shows I read it.
Yes.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Fole. Thank you, Chair. Just to say how delighted I am to see the equality, diversity being widened to include inclusion. It's estimated we have something like 5,000 vulnerable people in the city of Exeter, and hopefully it's taking those residents into account as well. The idea of having some sort of briefing and training on this, I think, is a good idea, Chair, because there are issues raised in my mind about taking out the references to class, caste, political opinion, a national origin and locality, but also the practical difficulties that are outlined for staff in trying to make judgments on people's political views. So I think we need a bit of teasing out there, I would suggest.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to thank you, Melinda, for bringing this document forward. It was great that you gave up some time to have a briefing and a meeting with me prior to this as well, so it's really good to see and to work through. I'm really, really pleased that we've got this anti-racism statement at the end as the appendix. It's absolutely vital. It's shocking that we need it in this day and age, really, and that we've not made more progress as a society, but, we are where we are with it, so I'm really pleased that we've got it, and particularly given the state of some of our other partner local authorities on this issue. I think Devon County Council was recently found to have, and it's shocking, so I'm going to quote directly, present, pervasive and dangerous levels of racism within its organisation. Now, that's a culture that had been allowed to develop under Conservative and Liberal Democrat leadership over many years. So I think it's really important that we don't allow that to creep into our systems here, and we acknowledge that we need to not just be racist ourselves, but passionately and avowedly anti-racist. So thank you very much for bringing this forward, and I just hope everybody supports the recommendation to adopt this.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. In the interest of inclusion, Councillor Wright, I forgot you.
Since you invited me to speak, I'm going to come up with a really, really nitpicky ex-head teacher thing. I'm sorry if I'm as bad as the last one. But just for the sake of inclusion in the policy, it's considered to be good practice now not to underline and use bold font both together, because it's very difficult to read if you have dyspraxia or dyslexia. So it's a really small point, but since we're in head teacher mode, I would just request that in any further new policies we avoid underlining and bold together. But apart from that, thank you very much for this policy, and I'm really glad to see the anti-racism statement finally landing. David and I had a bit of backwards and forwards with that, didn't we? But it's good to see that we now have it in place. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wright. I've written that in bold and I'll underline it just to make sure I don't forget it. Thank you. On that, I think that's a good idea if we do have so sorry, Bob, you're going to have to be working with Democratic Services and Melinda on getting some training sessions, bespoke training sessions for us, because these are important issues. I mean, it's not just tick box exercises. So thank you, Melinda, for that. We've got some recommendations there. I'd like to move it from the chair. Can I have a seconder? All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair. That has been carried.
Thank you very much. We do have a special meeting called for the 22nd of January, which is in addition to our statutory one on the 6th of February. Well, we've already got an item on there already, which we just need to go back and copper bottom to make sure that come forward. So that's another evening for you, Melinda. I can say that the paper will get issued in time. It's about the community grants. So just to say, if somebody's saying, what's all that about? That's what it was about. And hopefully you'll find that positive stuff, so I can quite say that. And obviously the papers, and I'll brief the leaders and everything in, we'll have a meeting about that in due course. So thank you very much. I think the meeting went very well. 7:39, nobody's won. 7:39, thank you very much, and see you soon.